So again, what's happening now? Oops, this seems better. Always something new. Anyway, yes, there from medieval times at universities, if there are three guys, then you have to give the lecture Tres Faciunt Collegium, and the guy who is giving the lecture also counts. So what we have done last time was that we talked about the long run, and the long run within the ASID model is the very surprisingly long run AS curve, which is just a vertical line in the price quantity diagram. And the reason for this is that we suppose that within the long run, well, the production possibilities which are driving the economy, because now we have the classes from the supply side, that these production possibilities are more or less fixed and only vary in the very long run. And you can more or less identify this with the concept of the potential output. Yeah, then we talked a little bit about the neoclassical model, especially about the neoclassical production function, and especially you have to keep in mind this parameter A, and this parameter A is the so-called technology parameter, and this more or less fixes the framework of our economy, while we suppose that the main input factors, capital and labor, these are varied by the enterprises in order to maximize profits. Yeah, and this A, I think, will dramatically change during the next years because of artificial intelligence. This you really have to keep in mind, because you are young and you will fully see this, in my eyes, dramatic change, which we will see especially also within the so-called creative work. Okay, let me put down here myself. So we talked about the curvature of the production function and that it is right-banded, and the reason for this was that in general we suppose that if we are already at a high level of production, then adding something is harder and harder. So still, if we increase input here, labor L, and go to the right, still something of output is adding, but the additional output is decreasing, which we obtain by the next unit of labor if we are already at a high production level. Well, and together with this, from profit maximization, we obtained a labor demand which is falling depending on the real wage, so to speak, the price of labor. Hello, the price of labor. And this classical dependence, the demand for our goods is decreasing with prices. This is just here derived from this classical, neoclassical production function. This is just a direct consequence of this assumption of the curvature. that we are right-banded and that the slope of this function, of this blue function, is decreasing. Because then if we increase the costs represented here by the linear line starting in the origin, if the costs are, or if the prices are increasing, then this cost function is turning to the left with a larger slope, and well, we find the larger slope where we have the profit optimum is also on the right, on the left side at the production function. This hopefully you have seen also in your administration courses and in your micro courses in the starting semesters. Well, and then we also derived the labor supply. So we are supplying labor. If you have finished your studies, you are supplying labor. You are not demanding labor. Sometimes, one have to say this again, that not you are demanding labor. The companies are demanding labor. And that what we would think at a first step, that, well, we are working more, the more we are paid, that this actually, from a macroeconomic perspective, cannot be directly derived. And the reason for this, where is the difference between the substitution effect if prices are changing and the income effect if prices are changing. And for this, we modeled this situation, how much I want to work given the wage I've paid and given the price of the consumption goods which I want to buy after I have worked, or this is the reason why I work, because I want to buy goods. And in this case, I demonstrated you that this is, in the end, one-to-one, what you have seen in your micro course. If you just identify the inverse of real wage as the price for your consumption good, that we assume, or that we identify one as a price for our spare time. So this is somehow something like a numerator within our model. And, well, the time I could work, in general, we would say if we have to sleep 8 hours per day, then you can think of that you can per day work 16 hours. So you have a bad budget of 16 hours, and this you can split into your working time and into your spare time. So we have a budget, we have two prices, and we have two goods which we want to have, spare time F and the consumption good C. Well, and then this is just, as you have seen it in micro, a household optimization where you want to put your indifference curve representing your utility as far to the upper right side as possible. Well, and then you have somewhere your optimum split between spare time and working time. And if now the prices are changing, so if now real wage is changing, then your budget line is changing. And if real wages are increasing, then your budget line on the vertical axis turns up. Well, and then you have to re-optimize your, or you as a household, you will re-optimize yourself. So you will obtain a new split between spare time and working time. Well, and then taking the red line, the red budget line, now as your general restriction, you again look for the indifference curve, which is as far away to the upper right side as possible. Well, and this could then be a point on the right of your starting optimal point, and in general it could be a point on the left. And where it is, this depends on the utility function, on the preferences in our economy. Well, both is possible. And then we argued that, well, why is this possible? So increasing spare time, although real wages are increasing, well, this is due to the so-called income effect. If I suppose that at this point, maybe I have 5,000 euros per month, and then I say, well, I'm more or less happy with 5,000 euros per month. And if then real wages are increasing, or wages are increasing, and I paid more working my 10 hours or something like this, then I can say, well, since I'm already happy with 5,000 euros, I can now decrease my working time, because now maybe with 9 hours, I'm still getting 5,000 euros. And this is just an individual choice. This could be the case. Well, and the other one, this is what we maybe at first would expect. This is just if I get more money per hour, then I start to increase my working time. Because why? Well, then I could buy relatively more consumption goods. But also, this just depends on the individual preferences. And which one is larger within your preferences? Well, this is your free choice. But then, again, we are in the macroeconomic perspective. And since we are in the macroeconomic perspective, we look at our people in our society in general, and within a developed country, we more or less see that the income here income and here number is distributed like this. So this here are the rich people within our society. So, and the number of these rich people is quite small. So this is a histogram. Hopefully you know what a histogram is from your introductory statistic courses. So the height of this function represents just the number. Let's say this in Germany, I think we have roughly per year the median income is about 40,000 euros for Germany. Pardon? Well, this is a medium income. If you split the income distribution in Germany, then 50% of the people have less than 40,000 euros per year, and 50% have more than 50,000 euros. But then you see this income distribution is not symmetrically. So we have a relatively low number of very rich people. Let's say this is more than 100,000 or something like this. So there we have a relatively small number, and in general we can think, well, people who think about themselves that the money they have is already enough, that these are in general rich people, and that in general the poor people or the people with the average income, if you offer them, well, now you have the possibility not to earn 40,000 euros per year, but 45,000 euros per year. Then we would say, roughly in this part of our income distribution, where most of the people are situated in our economy, that they will increase their work if the wage is increased. But this is actually only an assumption, or this is just this you have to verify from real data. Well, and in general we find this. But this is then an empirical fact. So this one is an empirical fact, while this one here, LD of omega minus this, comes from theory, so to speak. This comes from the assumption that enterprises are profit maximizers. Maximization. Okay. And together with these two aspects from the demand and the supply side, then we can say we put them, supply and demand, together in one diagram, calculating the cut of our two functions, and this is then the labor market equilibrium. Well, and then in our view now, in the neoclassical theory, now we say, well, our economy should mainly be driven by the supply side. And this means now we have here our optimal labor amount, and with this optimal labor amount we go to the production, and that then this to our production, and that labor is the main production input, and so this one then more or less determines our production level, and that now the demand is following our production level YS. Okay, and then we also can have look a view in our whole economy, and within our whole economy there will be many markets. There will be capital markets, there will be labor markets, there will be the goods market, there will be the money market, and so on. Well, and if all these markets are functioning in a fully perfect competitive way, and all these markets are have an interdependence between, because we need the money to buy goods. So they are the dependence between the money market and the goods market. We need the labor in order to produce goods. So there we have the dependence, and so on and so on and so on. And then Leon Walras, maybe one of the fathers of economic theory, professor in Geneva in the 19th century, he formulated then a law, and now it is called the so-called Walras law. And this means if we look simultaneously at all our markets, and some markets are not in equilibrium, then we can say, well, at one market we had an excess demand, and on other markets we had excess supply, and so on and so on and so on. But since all markets have an interdependence, then the sum of all excesses have to sum up to zero. And this you also can compare to our circular flow. Remember, there we looked at the household sector, the government sector, the entrepreneur sector, and there we calculated also all inflows, outflows, and then we knew we had 5 sectors we have looked at, and then we knew, okay, when I have already calculated the inflows and outflows at 4 sectors, then I also know by definition, because I have a closed circular flow, that at the 5th sector also the inflows and the outflows have to match. Well, at first, of course, we say that this is the excess demands, and now we assume that our markets are perfectly functioning. So in general, then we assume that a market is very fast, tends very fast to equilibrium. And if we assume that a market is in equilibrium, and now we are looking simultaneously at all markets, then we also know if n-1 markets in equilibrium, the last market, so to speak, I do not have to calculate or to look at this market, because then directly I know this market has also to be at equilibrium. And yeah, for this, then if we look in the neoclassical view on our economy, then we look at the labor market. We look at the capital market from the supply side, because this we need in order to produce. We look at the money market. And then in the end, we do not have to look at the commodity market, because we know if all other markets are in equilibrium, then also in this theory, the last market, so to speak, the commodity market has also to be in equilibrium. And therefore, we do not have a separate analysis of this market. Well, yep. Yeah, every market you can think of. Of course, we are here somehow in a theory, of course. Yeah, but in general, yeah, you look in the macroeconomic perspective. You look at the labor market. You could look at the capital market, money market in the long run. Also, then we can think of yeah, you can split capital market in long run capital, short run capital, something like this. And also, then if you go into more detail, then you split also the commodity market in the last consumption goods, and that, of course, you have in your production process the intermediate goods. Well, you can make it as complicated as you want. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, qualitatively spoken, this neoclassical view is summarized by so-called Say's law. Jean-Baptiste Say was also an economist, a philosopher in the 19th century, and he formulated his idea how economy is functioning. And yeah, he then assumed that more or less we just start the production of some good. Think of this as just a starting point. Of course, this is somehow a hand-egg problem, but think of a starting point that you just start, you have some spare time, and you just start to produce goods. Well, and then if you think of the economy that we have a supply-driven economy, then there are these goods. And then we assume that automatically, if there are some goods, then the demand is coming. Well, and then we can think of, while we are producing and sell these goods, we can also say that within this production process, depending on capital and labor, we have labor income and we have wage income. Labor income and capital income, sorry. Well, and then we also can say if there is income, there's again demand because we want to spend our income. And then somehow a circle starting from the supply side is initiated in our in our economy. Well, and then when we have talked about the magic square, then we can say, well, there is some production process within our society. And then especially we have there the labor market with some equilibrium wage. We have a democracy, so to speak, or we have free people. And all our free people, they can just choose, do I want to work if there an average wage is 15 euros per hour or something like this? Well, it's a bit higher in Germany, but think of this. And then you can choose by yourself, do I want to work for this wage or not? If you are not working, of course, you are unemployed, but this is your free choice. Supply-driven economy at this point just means everything is working via our markets, and then there is only a free choice unemployment, which is corresponding to our production level in our economy. And therefore, we call this unemployment then the natural unemployment. Well, and then we can go to the data, and for Germany, we have also to add that we have our social security system that you also can think of, should I work or should I take just the payment from the social security system? This is just the actual discussion which we have. Is this payment from our social security system too high so that I just stay at home and do not work? And roughly we say that if we see in Germany an unemployment rate of 3 to 5%, then we more or less speak of a full employment situation. Due to this view that, well, anyhow, you cannot do anything about if you are living in a democracy. Okay, and now, we more or less want to try to put everything together, and this is the so-called neoclassical synthesis. And within this synthesis, now we put our demand view, ISLM model, and our neoclassical view together. And how do we do this? Well, we say supply-driven economy, and labor is the main production factor. So more or less, the labor market is determining what we can produce. For this, we just look at the down left side at the labor market. Because here, this is real wage, and this is labor. Well, if we put real wage to the left and the amount of labor downwards, then of course we have that labor supply is then a function which is starting from the upper right side going down to the left side. So think of this. If this would be the labor market with real wage and labor, then this would be supply. And now you just flip the horizontal axis to the left and the vertical axis downwards. Okay? Well, and in this case, labor demand would look like this. Okay? So here we have the labor market equilibrium. And so here we have our equilibrium amount of labor. Now we go into the right, and here we have Y depending on L. So here we find the production. Remember, this we had just here, labor and production. Well, and what did we said? Neoclassical production function, L and Y, this right banding function. But now we have to take production to the right and labor downwards. So what we are doing then is just turning our diagram from this perspective by 90 degrees. Yeah? So if we're turning this down by 90 degrees, this then means that our production function is looking like this. Okay? So now we suppose that production level is mainly determined by our labor. So then we go with our equilibrium amount of labor to our production function. And what we then obtain is, so to speak, the supply side of our amount of production, of our production level in our economy. So going upwards, this would be then y star equals ys. And now think of our ASAD model. This production level is now our long run AS curve, our long run supply curve. And therefore we call this the neoclassical synthesis. We had in our model now the demand side and the ID curve we had derived from our ISLM model. And the AD curve was just a falling function of quantity in prices. Y depending on prices, falling function. YD. And here, since we want in a minute to some interpretation of this model, here we had discussed fiscal policy and monetary policy. So this function is depending on government expenditure, and this function is depending on nominal amount of money. Yes? YS. So this is our AS curve from AS curve from our ASAD model, and this is our AD curve. So this diagram on the right is now nothing else than this diagram here, but only with the long run AS curve. We omit now the medium term AS curve, okay? So where we are here. So, well, and then this right side then determines our overall equilibrium within our model, the dependence of our production, of our income on prices. So this one is our equilibrium price. Well, and then we have also here some diagram with prices here and real wages here. And through this, maybe you have also to go at home, because what do we find here? Say P, and now here I write nominal wages W times 1 over P. Okay? Because here I have just W over P is real wages. And what do I have now here? I have a function 1 over P. Suppose that since I have here only on the vertical axis only prices P, if I look only at this diagram on the left upper side, then I can think of the nominal wage as just a parameter. This is just some number, 15 euros per hour. Well, and this then means that this diagram represents something what you have seen in school, where you have here f of x, and x is now p, and our function is just 1 over p, or a constant times 1 over p, or 1 over x. So f of x is then a constant c times 1 over x. The same as here. The constant is w and x is p. Well, and how does a function looks like? F of x is 1 over x. How does it look like? F of x equals 1 over x. A straight line? Really? Well, then just think of if you put x as a very large number, then it is almost 0. Oh? So in the limit, you are just at the horizontal line. And now think of x is a very small number, 0.000001. Then f of x is a very large number. So if x is decreasing, becomes a very small number, the limit is the vertical line. Well, and this then looks like this. Okay, do you know how you call a function like this? Well, it's a decreasing function, of course. It's a convex function, great, yeah. But this has also a specific name, and this is a hyperbola. Well, and so here, then you have again just slip the axis to the left. Of course, still we have a function which is looking like a hyperbola. Well, and this hyperbola has to go through the point determined by our equilibrium real wage and our equilibrium price level. So this looks like this. Well, and this is now our overall equilibrium within our economy. And in this economy, here you find it a little bit better drawn than my hand drawing. Within this model, now we also can ask ourselves, what happens if G is increasing? Let's do this in red. Again, as we always have done it, we have to identify which function, which curve is will be where we find a direct impact in this model. So in which function we find explicitly government expenditure. Yeah, and at which function? Yes, here at the AD curve we find it. And we have learned from the ASAD model, if G is increasing, then AD is going upwards. Of, let's say, plus delta G of P G plus delta G M. Well, but now what we see in our model, since we are a production-driven, a supply-driven model, our production function is not changing. This looks again only like this. No technology change. No invention of ChatGPT or something like this. So this stays also at this level, our long run AS curve. So what happens then is just going to the left, we obtain a new price level. But also at the labor market, production function, our preferences. We have not made any assumption that our preferences should change, that our utility function should change. Only government expenditure is changing. So also nothing happens at the labor market. So the only thing then is that we obtain a new price level, and this then only means this hyperbola representing the equilibrium real wage is also going upwards. So this means only the price level is increasing, since production function and utility function are not changing. Well, this, of course, we also derived in the ASAD model, where we then said in the end, also the medium-term AS curve is going upwards, and in the end, we just also end up at our given production level. Okay, and then what happens if M is going up? Again, we see M is also, we find M also only directly in our AD curve. For this also, we derived that if M is increasing, we have an increase, or we have a shift of our AD curve, now depending on the higher nominal level of money. So Y double prime D of P, G, and M plus delta M. And again, let's say then it would be somewhere here. We have a price level and a new hyperbola representing the nominal, double prime. So this one. Only the price level, and of course also I have to add here the price level and nominal wages are increasing. And we see also nothing else happens, as we have seen it in the end. Also only wages and prices are increasing. So within this model, then, as we have also derived it in the ASAD model, we obtain only inflation. And what we should do is, well, try. So the advice is just somehow try to change your production possibilities. So if this curve is moving to the right, so inventing ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, is just something like this, that in the same time, with the same labor input, you can produce more things. And this would just mean that your production function shifts to the right. Then something changes also in the production level within your economy. And of course, also in this model happens something if, especially here, you are changing something in the preferences, because then the labor supply function will change. Somehow we do this if we say to our people, we should stop smoking or something like this. Okay, so now we are done. This is summarized what I have talked about, and this is then the end of the lecture. That in general, yeah, you should make up your mind by yourselves. We have talked about models with a mainly demand driven theory. This is the Keynes model. And we have now talked about a model which is supply driven. And in general, what we find is that we have these price rigidities in the short run, especially at the labor market, that sometimes then monetary policy and fiscal policy are functioning in the view of John Maynard Keynes. But in the long run, we should not be very surprised that in the end, the general market's laws, Walras law and Say's theorem, that these long run views apply. They even apply if you're living in a dictatorship, because in behind, still we are changing just our goods. Look at the communist times. Well, there you had your 5-year plans, what you should produce, what have done the people behind these plans. They talked to each other and said, well, can you help me at that point? Then I do something for this, for you at the other point. In the end, I think, this market view is a very strong theory. That we always try to change this, and in the end, the human beings are acting like Adam Smith has explained it 350 years ago. But of course, if we are an economic advisor, then we have to admit there is no true model. We always have to look in which situation are we just right now, and sometimes it could be a very good choice to increase demand just by giving all people additionally 100 or 1,000 euros. Then something good happens. But now we are in Germany, just at these discussions. After the High Court has decided, well, no additional 60 billion euros. Well, now they decreased this amount. I think this morning in the news, they are still looking for 17 billion euros. And they do not know where they find it. Okay, so that it was another 15 minutes, and then we will, do some little exercises. I don't know how much we can manage. On Thursday, we have also then our last meeting. On Thursday, then is the last. No. So macroeconomics, and well, let's start with this one, GDP growth. Yep, not. Oops. Yeah. And there is. And so in 2018, nominal GDP was 3.1%. In 2019, 2.7. The increase of the GDP deflator, so overall price level in 2018 was 1.5 and 2.2 in 2019 determined the real growth rate of GDP in 2018 and 2019. Well, and here I should add mathematically exact. And in 2019, we should have 3.44 trillion euros, and backwards, we should then calculate nominal GDP. Well, this we have, I think, done already once or two times. You know that I always try to do it also within this one, and therefore let me just copy this. This one we do not need now, and so this you can see hopefully, and we want to start in 2017. Yep, good. So this one, and then we also need this and this. So, well, I told you that the point where you set the 100, this doesn't matter. But in general, let's take the starting year in our task as a 100. And here I take the first formula that this is just nominal over real times 100. A bit larger. Let's take 30. And let's put this here. So, the first very hard thing is there are some given numbers. Where can I put the given numbers in my task? Here, well, so 3.1. Next one. Oh, nominal, sorry. Oh, this is not right. Nominal. This is nominal, so this I have to move. There, and that is not working. So then Let's do it with my handwriting. 3.1 and in 2019 2.7. What else? Increase of GDP deflator. Deflator is here. This is nothing else than the growth rate of our GDP deflator. So 1.5 and 2.2. What else? In 2019, we have 1 trillion euros in nominal GDP. So this is 3.44. Let me put this in here. So this was 3.1%, I think. 3.1, oops, 3.1%, 2.7%, and here we had 1.5% and 2.2 up to 2.2%, and this is 3.44. Okay. So what shall I do? Determine the real growth rates. So I'm interested in this and in this, and I'm interested in this one. What can I do? Well, and think of mathematically exact, so you cannot just take the so-called Fisher equation and just take the difference between price change and nominal change of growth, of nominal growth. Well, what we can do is just we can calculate the indices of GDP deflator and of nominal GDP. Since we have here 100, an increase of 3.1 means that we obtain here 103.1. Okay? And here we obtain 101.5. Well, the next two I cannot do in my head because then I have a growth of 103.1 by 2.7%. So for this, I just go to my Excel data, and then the formula is just the starting value times 1 plus the growth rate, 103.1, and then I put the formula downwards and I obtain 105.88. Well, since this is the same formula for the GDP deflator, I just can copy this one on the right side. So 105.88, and this one is calculated by 103.1, 1 plus 0.031. And this one was 103.73. Okay. So this one is 101.5 times 1.0.022. Yep. Here you have the formula. Well, I will upload tomorrow the files because unfortunately after this lecture I have a meeting. So all the uploads I will do tomorrow, hopefully. Okay. So, and now we just take the definition of GDP deflator. GDP deflator is nominal GDP over real GDP times 100. Because now we are interested, of course, in these two indices, because if we have these numbers, then we can backward calculate what we are interested in, the growth rates for real GDP. So GDP deflator is just GDP num over GDP real times 100, and this we solve for real GDP. So GDP real is just GDP num over GDP deflator times 100. Okay? And this we just need to calculate these two indices. So this one is then nominal GDP over GDP deflator times 100. And here the same, 101.58, 101.58, and 102.07. So this one is nothing else than 103.1 over 101.5 times 100, and this is 105.88 over 103.73 times 100. Well, and then we know that this is 1.58%. From 100 to 101.58 is just 1.58%. Okay? So this one is then this number over this number minus 1. And here we obtain 0.49%. So what we have is 101.58 minus 100 over 100, and this one is 102.7 minus 101.58 over 101.58. Yes. Oh, sorry. It's this here. So no, it's no. Okay. Yeah, and well, what else should we do? We should take this number here. Well, and though we just invert our calculation, maybe we then just calculate backwards these two numbers. We of course know the that 105.88 over 103.7 3.1 is 2.7%. So what we need, if we call this x, x over 344 is 103.1 over 105.88. Solving this for x is just multiplying this by 3.44. Okay, so this one is then this over this times 3.44 is 3.35. And let's take another color, red, this one. Here we have x over 3.35 times is equal to 100 over 103.1. So also multiplying this, and of course in Excel I can just copy the formula up here. If I'm clicking in here, then you also see that this is just 100 over 103.1 times 3.35. So 3.25. Okay. Well, and for the exam, you can do it by hand. Anyhow, I will not pose any questions which you cannot do in time just by hand. But well, of course, you can do it also by Excel since it's a digital exam. But keep this in mind. If you want to try this within the exam in Excel or with some other software packages, well, maybe I showed it to you. I have no time for the inflation task, so this we will do on Thursday. Maybe you know this one. Hopefully I have already showed this. Well, this is maybe a very, very powerful mathematical tool, free front end in the internet. And there you can just say solve. Yeah, let's take the example. This one. Oops. Let's take this one. You just formulate this, maybe not with a power to 3, but only this one. Oh, sorry. Then I have to take here a minus because otherwise you would have a complex number. And then you have your solution. Well, this I also mentioned in the school of my children, that since we all use a pocket calculator, we should, after school, be able to use something like this, because then I don't know how it's called in English, but in German we call this solution formula for quadratic functions is called midnight formula or PQ formula. Yeah. Well, of course you can do it by hand, but if you know what you do, then why not to taking all these very, very helpful tools? And then you have all these things by hand. Well, nobody is adding 5 numbers, 100, 217, 5,628. Nobody is doing this anymore by hand. But of course, you should be able to do it by hand, because then you know what you are doing. And of course, using this tool, you should know the PQ formula or midnight formula to solve quadratic equations. Because then you know what you are doing, and then you can also judge the output. And think of ChatGPT and other AI chatbots. You always, as a human being, you have to judge the output. But using this means, and here, and this will the end then today, using these very helpful tools just mean that this is bending to the right. Because then with the same level of labor input, we obtain a much larger level of output. And then the cake is increasing. We can divide within our society. And actually, I don't know if we in Europe think about it, that in the long run, this is a task which we have to do. And I don't know what happens if the cake is not increasing anymore. Okay, so thank you very much for today. Here I gave you the links for some other little tasks we can do together then on Thursday. And I will give you then also a short overview of the whole lecture and give some hints for the exam. Okay, thank you very much.